let's get into the book.
Paula,
I would like to name
Paula, 1 second. So I just want to take a moment that Dimitry Léger, the actual author of the book, is here. Dimitry, are you in Stockholm now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
It's 1 a.m. in Stockholm right now.
Good, good. So for some reason, I thought we would see you next week, but no problem. You're here now, and we definitely want to just acknowledge your presence, but also, if we have any questions or anything like that for Dimitry, by all means, you know how we do when an author is here and we go on attack. So
yeah, I actually want to ground us in that for a moment, because it is a shift in how we usually prepare for authors to come, right? And maybe folks are pondering questions, or maybe folks are sitting in the stuff that they've read. So Dimitry, thank you for joining us. We were anticipating your arrival next week, but this will do. But I want to name for you, if this is your first time in our space, that we're a community space. So we like to take reflections on what we've read. It's odd because you're going to hear like some reflections in real time.
It's fine.
And I want to ground our book club members in that, like, yes, Dimitry is here, and yes, acknowledge his presence, and let's take advantage of time with the author. And also, like, this is a regular session, right? Just like every week, just like every time we have an author. Be in your questions, be in your space of discovery. I see everyone jotting down notes. Now we're getting ready. I see, I'm so excited. So I want to actually, probably it's best if we open up for questions now. And then if there are any sort of questions or things you'd like to ask the author directly, and then afterwards, we'll take it into a discussion, shared base point, where even Dimitry, you can reflect with us as well. So feel free to unmute yourself, folks, and ask some questions.
Well, first of all, let me thank you guys for choosing my book. I really appreciate it. I love every one of the readers, even with mixed feelings, even with highs and lows. I'm grateful for readers. I'm glad this book club. I'm glad it exists. And I hope it stays around forever. And I'll be back even when it's not my book. I'm not going to stay here for the whole session because it's 1 a.m. over here. I live in Europe, but I want to shout. It just so happens tonight I was out late, and it's like it's a perfect fit. I was just looking forward to this. I may pop in again next Wednesday, but I had to pop in and say hi and acknowledge my gratitude towards all you guys. And the Bronx. I'm a Brooklyn kid. I've been to the Bronx like 3 times in my life, but
we forgive you.
I appreciate it. Love is love, and the 5 boroughs are the 5 boroughs. So the book was written like with like New York City in its veins, and I appreciate being part of the club.
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge that Dimitry, a couple of years ago, also participated in the Mosaic Literary Conference, which is one of our other programs that we do with the Literary Freedom Project. So thank you again for that. Does anyone have any questions? I'll just, I'll get the ball rolling. So about setting, I mean, it's obvious that the book has to be set in Haiti. But did you go into this thinking that the earthquake would be like the pivotal moment, or was it more character driven?
It was character driven. I've been thinking about writing about Haiti basically all my life since I discovered reading and discovered writing. I knew eventually I'd have to write about Haiti. And writing about Haiti is not easy when you're Haitian, because the place is complicated, the place is in a tough space. The highs are really high, the lows are really low. And I've been wrestling with how do you write about the beauty that can be found in hard places, in difficult times. Where does hope come from? Where does love come from in difficult situations? And I've been reading a lot of World War II books. I've been reading a lot of novels set in Africa. I've been reading, or probably a lot of war books. Do a good job of talking about, the triumph of the human spirit in difficult times, in anticipation. And then the earthquake happened. I went there to work for the UN after the earthquake, and I had no intentions of writing a book about that time. It was 8 months of delivering water, medicine, and food and news to 3 million refugees, figuring out how to bury 300,000 people. I was spokesperson of the UN, and we were just trying to keep hope alive and get the international community to keep sending support, keep hope alive with the local community, and also alert the international community to the gravity of the situation, how it's a long-term disaster, and how it's an opportunity to build a place back better. It was long days, long 8 months. My wife was freaking out with 2 small kids back home. But there I was living in a tent and doing that. And along the way, an agent reached out to me, and the agent was like, hey, if you want to write a book about this, I'm here for you. I was like, dude, that's the last thing I'm thinking about. But when I got home after 8 months and I had a couple months to recover, I looked back at the good times I had during that period. And the good times, the idiosyncrasies and the good times, I saw Haitians squeeze out of the difficult period. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a novel. I found my Haiti novel. And my agent asked me, was checking in and like, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I think I'm going to do a novel. He's like, really? He wanted a memoir about being Haitian and going back to Haiti and helping out Haiti in this darkest hour. But I'm like, no, I think a novel. I want to have a laugh. And he said, okay, well, good luck. Novels are all about the voice. So good luck with that. And I went and I wrote half the book in 9 months. And then I sent it to my agent and he liked it. And then I came back home and I wrote the rest of the book in 2 months because I was already over 40 and I really just wanted to get the book out my system and into the world. But yes, why Haiti? Because I always wanted to write about Haiti, and I always wanted to give back somehow and make sense of it. And why the earthquake and not say the dictatorship or the revolution? And there's been a lot of, and the occupation of the US, there's been a lot of dramatic times in Haitian history. But maybe because I experienced the post-earthquake, and also maybe because just for me, being there after the earthquake helped me find peace with Haiti. Because I left Haiti when I was young and I had a good life in America for about 20 years. And I felt like I was the lucky one. And I felt guilty about that. I felt expat guilt. Why was I so lucky? And I wanted to give back. And going back to do the work I did, that gave me peace. Because okay, ancestors, I left my home in Geneva to come out here. This really is terrible, but I'm going to do my little bit. And that gave me peace with my dad, who had long passed. And then I was able to just look at the place like, okay, well, this is the human spirit. The earthquake is a metaphor. Bad things happen. And bad things don't happen when you want them to happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't be bad things. Bad things happen. And how do you deal with surviving a bad thing? How do you deal with PTSD? Sometimes surviving is harder than suffering, or it's a different kind of pain. And I'd already known a lot about survivor's guilt. Being Haitian and American is fairly absurd. So it was an opportunity to explore the ironies of survivor's guilt, the ironies of surviving, period, when other people are not. And I found the humor in it here and there. And yeah, I found the book therapeutic, cathartic, and fun to write.
Thank you so much, Dimitry. That's amazing. I have a question as well, or a statement and then a question. The first is that last week, so just so you know, we just completed part 2, right? So that's where we're at in right now in the story. But last week when we met and we discussed our first couple of readings, and then I got a chance to go back and read as well, something that we also read on the internet was you making a connection between wanting to tell a story about something that is really hard and difficult and wanting to find the beauty in that, and how the mediums of poetry and journalism found like this amazing marriage. And the statement really is just to say that now, especially as we've gone through more flashbacks and we're in part 2, it's really resonating for me, the idea of like a good storytelling does happen in journalism, and commitment to tone does happen in poetry. And I think that it's just a beautiful blend, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I just wanted to name that. Because from what we've read, it was something that you weren't sure about. You were like, or maybe at first unsure. And it was like, well, how do I actually piece together this medium in which like I know how to do and I feel mastery at it, with something that everyone is trying. You know, poetry is one of those things that we all try to approach and tell a story by. And I just want to name that for me, in my reading, it's, as a poet and as someone that enjoys journalism, it's working. I love it. Next, my question kind of goes to what you were naming before. We also read in some from external readings from the internet as a group, and we had a discussion where you had named, I'm going to mess up the phrasing, and my apologies. It's been a long day in the Bronx, but you had named that trying to write or trying to name the reason why folks don't feel a sense of guilt, or where is that sense of guilt from folks who maybe leave Haiti and don't return back. And I think the interviewer was asking you like, well, what's the answer? And you were like, well, it's the book. The book is the answer. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify that for us a little bit more around, especially because you just spoke about your own survivor's guilt and your own relationship with finding peace when you return to Haiti. And many of us are like of Caribbean descent or expats in our own cultural ethnicity. So I'm just wondering if, in general, without giving anything away, what is the answer to that question, right? Like, as we read the book, what are we looking for in order to answer that question of like, why don't people go back?
It's hard. Migration is hard. And finding a life and building a life in a new country is extremely hard. For some reason, Americans are really good at it. And America kind of makes it easier than just about anywhere else to be an outsider and try to find your way in. But migration is still hard and exhausting. And once you get into a new country and it's like your second or third language, and you work your way in and you find a toehold and you climb, circling back is difficult. And circling back with meaningful commitment, it's really hard to figure out, because the countries move on without you. The family home gets sold. Aunts and uncles die. Your favorite cousins join you in New York. So it's hard to find a place in a society you've already left. I'd say that. And then I'd say, on top of that, I'd say, well, art is a good way to travel. I never lived in Jamaica. I never lived in Jamaica in the 60s, but thanks to Bob Marley, I feel like I know Jamaica like better than my own home. Art is a good vehicle for traveling. And so as an artist, as a writer, it's a nice tool to be able to draw to be able to circle back and find fun. Because when people ask me about writing novels, and then my first thing is like, please make it funny. Like my agent said, voice, I'd take it a step further. A novel's not an essay, it's not a job, it's find humor. Even if it's like humor in the darkest places, but find humor, because nonfiction, the New York Times, they cover all the real stuff. I think a novel has an opportunity to give people lightness and depth somehow. And so it's a good vehicle for circling back and for traveling. But people with regular jobs and regular careers and who built a life in a new place against the odds, we take it for granted in New York, but it ain't easy. It ain't easy. If you do it and you make it, circling back is hard. Circling back is hard. That's my only answer to that, because our countries are not easy. That's why our parents left. Nobody wants to leave their country. I tell people this all the time, especially in Europe. I'm like, I don't want to be here. I go back to my country in a heartbeat. My country's a mess, so your country will do. But don't get it twisted. We'd rather be home. Our parents would rather have been home. Our grandparents would rather have stayed home.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question before I ask another question? This has more, Greg?
Yeah, because before, I mean, it's a good transition from what Dimitry just mentioned about finding humor. Make sure to find the humor, because nonfiction is not going to really give that to you. I keep getting caught up on this scene from part one of the president having that dreamlike state where he is approaching St. Peter at the gates of heaven, in line behind every ruler that Haiti ever had. So now I'm wondering, was that your intention to kind of inject humor in that scene? Partially maybe making a political statement as well, in terms of, you know, them all trying to prove why they're worthy to enter heaven, despite the fact that they've exploited their people and massacred their people, whatever it is that any given ruler did. Just wondering what your primary motivation behind that scene in particular was.
Well, the president by himself and his journey is one joke after another, to be honest. Being president of Haiti is such an absurd position to be in. I like the challenge of humanizing a president of Haiti, because you won't find it anywhere else in the press, but you find it in Shakespeare, you find it about other leaders who are less than perfect. I like that challenge. But the more I wrote about him, the more his situation was terrible. His life really sucked. And for me, he by definition, he was a subject of humor. So yeah, that scene, that whole thing of like, you seem to have all this power from according to everyone around you, but once you get on a plane and you get to New York, to the rest of the world, you're running a bad company. You're like running a poor country in the richest hemisphere on earth. That's really hard to do. That's really a different degree of failure. That's one of the things that Haitians have to deal with, is that, wait, the Bahamas is the 58th most developed country on earth. DR is like 88. Like, we live in a really wealthy neighborhood, and America is right across the street. How do we get this wrong? Because your neighborhood is the first step towards real estate. You know, location. Fundamentally, Haiti is well positioned to develop because wealthy trading partners are right there, but they can't get it right. And the legacy of that, the burden of that, makes the president's job a bit like Sisyphus. And I wanted to capture that. And turns out him and his predecessors were similarly Sisyphean in many ways.
How much of that position of Haiti is America's fault or America's doing, as it is throughout the Caribbean? America seems to have outsized sway. I mean, considering where we are in relation to the Caribbean and how, you know, economics work, it doesn't seem like there's any Caribbean country that can sustain itself. I'm sure they all could sustain themselves, but I don't know if America, the interests we have here, want Haiti or Jamaica, or, any of these countries to really be sort of, in quote, self-sufficient. You have an opinion on that?
Well, globalization, global economics, trade history happens to be what I do in my day job, and all countries' fates have been interconnected for like the last 500 years. Colonialism was the first version of globalization. It was a global enterprise. It was moving goods across the oceans. It was a bunch of countries separating different duties and being able to carve out the Western Hemisphere and exploit. The Dutch were the accountants. The Spanish built the ships. The Italians were the navigators. It was a great global enterprise, and globalization, the interconnectedness of nations and their economies has been around since then. So it's hard for a country to develop by itself, because all the countries that got rich because they all did business with each other and got rich together. So no one can go it alone. Not even China. China blew up because we couldn't stop exploiting its factories, and then it copied the best practices from our business practices there, and then copied us, and now rivals us. It's always been interconnected, but particularly in the Western Hemisphere. So no country can develop without being friends with the richest kid on the block. And when you're friends with the richest kid on the block, good things happen to you. Like this tonight, I was pointing out how the Bahamas is the best run Black country on earth. It's the 58th most developed country on earth. The only countries better developed than the Bahamas are in Europe, Canada, the US, Japan, and the Arab countries. The Bahamas is just Bahamas, then Barbados. They're running a smooth, great ship over there in those countries. But then somebody said, wait, but the Bahamas is basically another American state. Well, there you go. There you go. When the richest kid on the block says, you know what, I like to vacation there. I suggest you vacation there. I'll invest so that our people could vacation there well. Boom, the country blows up. And when the richest kid on the block says, you know what, I'm not messing with you. Even more so, embargo. It's a wrap. So countries have been on the outs with America, Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, they suffered. Their economies are basically in the 1950s. And countries that are in good terms with America, man, they do extremely well. And there's no way around that, because that's how globalization works. When America sneezes, everybody catches a cold. No way around that. $12 trillion economy. It's from there to China to Australia. America is in good terms with you. You eat really, really well. But they're not on good terms with you. You're not eating.
Dimitry, let me ask you, depending on what they may say, a more intense question or a less intense question. Can you, we speak often of like love in its romantic sense. And I think what part of the purpose, I'm putting words in your mouth, but let's see. Part of the purpose, or part of my understanding of this is like taking the romantic sense and sort of like emphasizing or replacing it almost with like the patriotic sense, or that sense of being a patriot, and more the sense of like love, and how do you love something with a sense of tenderness? And that can be country, that can be person, that can be spirit, right? I think is kind of what we're exploring as a community. What's love, Dimitry?
It ain't easy.
That's a fact.
But we can't escape it. Can't live without it.
Right.
Can't got it. Atheists can't live without it. People of faith can't live without it. You know, I'm a Libra, so I probably fall in love every time I walk out my door.
Second.
But we all do. You know what I mean? It's everything. It gets us out of bed. It gets us out of bed. It's all we think about. Love we had, love we didn't have. The minute I had kids, I was like, oh man, in 20 years, 30 years, he might be with a shrink complaining about me. I mean, all roads lead back to your parents. Why? Because you loved them so much and you expected so much from them. And all roads lead back to the kids and lead back to the spouses. And, you know, marriage is just paperwork. Divorce is just paperwork. Once you have kids with somebody, you're a family. And family is ups and downs because all that love is like so bound. So love ain't easy, but I know love is probably what gets us out of bed every day.
Yeah.
The rest is noise.
So speaking of love, I thought Alain was a better catch than the head of the country. I know we haven't gotten all the way, you know, not even about halfway through the book, but I was really like, wow, Alain he almost feels like a swashbuckler, to use an old term. Like he's a really, you know, go-getter, and he's like, you know, brave, and at least in his approaches to business and the world that he lives in. But she doesn't stick with him. What's going on here, Dimitry?
She's a fickle woman.
Bit of an underdog.
She's an unpredictable woman, and her choices got complicated because after surviving the quake, her husband developed a spine. Then so questions of honor.
Yeah,
huh?
Just to let you know, we are right at the point where the quake starts.
Yeah. It's not easy. Adultery is one of those fascinating tropes. It really is very dominant in Latin literature. It's very dominant in French literature. Even to this day, every other French movie is about adultery. And Alain has his fans. Which is strange because, you know, he's the adulterer. But he has his charms, and turns out the president has his charms too. But more importantly, but more importantly, Natasha is a hard to predict woman. Natasha is moody, she's imperious, she is fickle, she is also searching.
Yeah.
She's also searching. The earthquake changed everything, and she's transforming before our eyes, and everyone is.
Yeah, you had mentioned about art sort of being a vehicle for change and travel, and that's one of the things that she is sort of, well, she's not, once she sort of makes this decision, she's no longer grappling with it, but that was a part of her life that she thought she would pursue until she meets or gets married to the president. And I just, was that, I mean, it definitely was purposeful, but as far as like your philosophy, did you want to give one of the characters like that sort of artistic bent?
Her artistry emerged as I wrote. And her artistry probably dominates her more than any other thing part of her. Because her artistry and her faith kind of go hand in hand, and that search of, okay, what is my voice? Who am I now after this? And what do I have to say? That's a big part of her journey. And that's a big part of everybody's survivor journey. but because she's an artist and she had vehicles to communicate before, to tell her story, now it's like, okay, in this new context, after this, what do I have to say now? And it's a big part of her journey. I know. I remember I was married when I wrote the book, and I remember my then wife. She was like obsessed with trying to figure out which character was me, and well, 22-year-old woman, 25-year-old guy. I was neither. 60-year-old man. I was definitely not that. There's no middle-aged man having a midlife crisis in the book. But as a Haitian American who talks now unlike people who grew up in Brooklyn and New York City and are pretty smart, and there's an old guy wrestling with his legacy. But more importantly, it's an artist trying to find her voice and her meaning to her life in this context. And I could relate to that. I think all artists do. It's a constant search. And so yeah, I think that was the case with Natasha and Alain, and the love triangle, which is that she more loudly searched for her voice because she's an artist, and that's what artists do.
So we have a question from Renee. Renee says, why did you create her to have all those characteristics, to be so complex? And Renee, I don't know if you're in a position to unmute yourself and chat, but feel free to.
Because women are fascinating. Caribbean women are particularly fascinating to me. And what are characteristics, the strength of personality, the forcefulness, the charm, are just all qualities that I've always admired in Caribbean women. And they also mystify me and leave me in awe. And so as this woman travels up and down the city, looking for herself in many ways, I was just like the readers, like going, what the hell are you doing? What are you gonna do next? I hope you land on your feet. I know one person pointed out, well, doing one book signing, not even doing one book signing, when the book came out, I was at a synagogue in Jersey at my man's son's bar mitzvah. And my mom lives in Irvington, and I was in South Orange. And the book had just came out a week before. And it occurred to me that the story of a young woman who marries a much older man and who has an affair has parallels to her story. Now, this is like 4 years after I wrote the book. It occurred to me that this parallel existed with my mom. What are you gonna do? You can't escape these people. So that's one answer. And I didn't even see that one coming. And that happened like 4 years after I wrote the damn thing. So on one hand, it was natural curiosity and fascination with a certain type of woman from the islands. On the other hand, it was trying to figure out my mom. Go figure.
Anais, do you have a question?
I had a thought from the conversation we're having. It kind of is related to everything we've just been talking about, and starting with your question, Ron, about why did she not choose Elaine? And
you haven't been to the end yet. You don't know her choice.
No, so far. And that was so far. And so one thing I do, I kind of like, I feel like I want to argue for Natasha's complexity. Like, I don't want us to see her as, sorry, Dimitry, I don't want us to see her as fickle. I don't like that term. to relate to a woman is fickle. And I don't think it does justice to the very character you've created for us, especially where we are in the book. And so I was very impacted by the conversations that she has with her father, you know, when he puts her to bed and he reads her the stories. And then afterward is when it really gets deep and he has these philosophical conversations with her. And so for me, that's like part of the understanding of her depth and complexity, in which he is teaching her the very thing that she has betrayed. He's teaching her integrity and honesty and be good for goodness sake. I hadn't heard that phrase in decades.
Amen.
And then I really stopped in that moment. Like, what do we mean when we say that? It's like, don't be good to get something, be good for the sake of being good. And that's kind of like an anomaly these days in our culture. So I'm just thinking about this rearing, that she was put in an orphanage when she was 5 years old. And the way that, the way that was happened, you know, it's not even necessarily something maybe in the United States that we even think of. Like, people go to orphanages because their parents die, or they're by themselves or something. But for a set of parents to, when their child is 5 years old, to take her to the orphanage and to drop her off. And I don't know if it's like they say, or the mother says, don't expect me to come back. Or there's an assumption. There's something about this knowledge that they're not coming back. So this is, for me, all the stuff that is part of this complexity of her character. And then the thing of growing up with the prostitutes, you know, and how the message is get yourself a good, you know, like marry well, or get yourself money, or that pot of gold, you know, like, or else you're going to be poor, and don't you dare be poor. You know, it's like this. I felt very moved by this whole section in this part 2, where I think we get a lot of insight into what shaped her, and at least in this, you know, her husband, the president is just beginning to like redeem himself. We're just beginning to like have backbone and character, but not yet quite. And she is really like the guilt. I felt the guilt, like, and that's where I remember the father and like this upbringing and this conflict between integrity and pot of gold, and her like even chastising herself at this point in the book for having taken the pot of gold and lost the man that she loved. So I just wanted to share that because I found it so beautiful, the development of her character. And I didn't want us to lose that.
I appreciate that. Wait till you get to the ending.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Paula. Let's Coco.
So I knew I started this book late, partly because I read like the first few pages and I knew once I start, I wouldn't be able to stop. And that in fact happened. So I can't say anything. But the thing I wanted to just sort of say, and sort of like Anais, and it builds on what she said about Natasha and what you said about the president is, you said you felt, you know, you want to humanize him. And I think you did it. I just loved how you did it with all the characters, but I particularly liked how it's linked to, there's so many like there's all storytellers, and they talk about they're all really good talkers. And part of what humanizes them are the stories they tell. And they're also really good receivers of stories. And so when they hear stories, they actually read them really quite accurately. They know they're able to pull out the good things, but they're also able to like see all the bullshit also. And that seems, I don't know if you could talk about the sort of intersection of storytelling and humanizing, and the sort of, which I thought was really powerful in the story.
Yeah, I suspect that's probably a reflection of my roots in Haiti and America. America is really good at telling a story. It's really good at building its myths. It's very good at telling universal stories out of its own deeply unique, idiosyncratic stories. And Haitians, for some reason, they produce a disproportionate amount of writers, disproportionate amount of poets. Every other Haitian is a lawyer when you're in Haiti. It's unusual, but it's what Haitians do. They tell stories, and it's interesting too because Haitian primarily speak French and Creole, and then English comes in third. But I think it's the American impulse. I think it's the American impulse to self-mythologize and also just figure out yourself out loud, and wrestle with your demons out loud, wrestle with your history out loud. I think it's an American writ large impulse. And Haiti and the US are the two oldest countries in the hemisphere. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's not, that both countries like to tell their stories in different angles, in different ways, but all the time. All the time. I find random Swedes come up to me and talk about Lincoln. And I'm like, wow, I don't know who your Lincoln is. Every country has a Lincoln, but I can't name any of your presidents, any of the former Vikings that was ruling the place in the 1850s. But you know American history. And Haitians are similar, and maybe it's a vanity that comes with having being born of a revolution. But yeah, it's in the roots, it's in the culture. And I did notice belatedly that relationships with fathers are big in the stories people tell in the book. I was close with my father. He was a big storyteller. So some of it is universal and cultural and part of the artistic and cultural landscape of I grew up in, and part of it is personal. My dad liked to tell stories. He liked to read. He never mind having a bookish kid, and I gravitated towards those type of people, and I indulge in it too, I guess.
I want to be respectful of your time, Dimitry, because I know it's going on 2 a.m.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Does anyone have a question before I jump in with another question? One of the scenes that I was struck by, and I've always kind of gravitated towards that sort of post-earthquake Haiti and how devastated it was. Can you start to describe that when Natalie is at the airport and that's when the earthquake hits. But can you describe, because I'm assuming you went shortly after the earthquake, what the country actually looked like? And I know there's countryside and there's cities, so they're gonna have, different dynamics caused by the earthquake. But can you just sort of give like a firsthand opinion of that?
Well, post-earthquake is different than post-tsunami or the pictures you're seeing of Ukraine these days, post-bombing. The book Hiroshima, John Hershey, classic nonfiction book, very helpful as I was writing. Covers a lot of the shock and the devastation you see on people's faces and the walking wounded type of looks that you see post-earthquake, but you see post-disaster. But post-earthquake was different because literally the earth comes up and shatters. So you're literally seeing cracks on this road. You're seeing the road separated in two. You're seeing buildings, like a whole pancake building thing. It's different than a bombing, because bombs leave stuff standing, earthquakes don't. But a sense of the cracking and the breaking from the bottom up, you see that a lot. So you did see cars like tilted in weird ways, not quite hanging on a statue, but you saw cars that were thrown across 100 feet. But I remember, like, just imagine like the biggest pothole possible, but imagining it going through the entire country, because the earthquake hit the entire southern part of the country, and the whole Port Prince to Leogan area, the whole almost center of the place, but southeast of the place, and it just cracks everywhere. And I went to my house. I have a childhood home there, because one day we went to. I was a public information officer, so I took visiting officials and press to visit hospitals and schools and see the work we were trying to do. And I took visiting UN official to see a hospital in Carrefour, which is the neighborhood where I was born, which is the hospital where I was born, and which happened to be the epicenter of the earthquake. And when we came back from the hospital, we went to see the hospital, and the doctor was telling us how the director of the hospital said, a lot of people, there's still pregnant people who have to give birth, but they refuse to go inside. So he has to do all the births, him and his team have to do all the births in the hallways outside the hospital, because no one for that first month or two wanted to be inside of a building. It was too scary, because there were aftershocks, and then people were traumatized. They were afraid of, if I go inside, then it's gonna fall on my head. So he told us this story about, just having to do all these deliveries outside of women who were pregnant but also hurt from the earthquake. So there was this sense of people were always damaged. Nothing was left pure, because the earthquake, it's bottom up, so there's no escaping from it. So everybody was damaged in some way. But after visiting that hospital, we stopped by. I was like, all right, we gotta stop by my house. I want to see if it's still standing. And we popped in, it was on the way, and it was still standing. And I walk in, and the guy who was like watching the house for us, for my dad, he immediately recognized me, and we say hello, and we hug. And the other neighbors came through and said hi. And as we were sitting there in the living room, and I'm like, wow, my dad passed, but the place stayed exactly the same. And our friend who was staying there was, just left it the same. And I'm marveling at this house that I'd last seen when I was 14, and I'm looking around. And after a while, I noticed there's a crack going from the first floor to the stairwell leading to the roof. And I'm like, oh, we shouldn't be here. Any good breeze could knock down the building. Because it's the kind of ominous crack that in a cartoon, if you see it happen, go up in a building, it's like, oh, that's a sign that the crack's gonna happen and the building's gonna fall. And I was like, oh, guys, we have to go. And they're like, oh, but no, let's get beers. Dude, we have to go. And we got out, and that symbolizes a lot of what post-earthquake Haiti was. A week, and for the next 8 months, was navigating cracks, literally on the roads, but in every building you went in, and many people, because many people had stuff fall on them, and they dodged, and they were hurt. But then came also the paranoia that comes with earthquakes. Hurricanes have warnings, days, weeks in advance of hurricanes coming to you. Wars have warnings. Like, we knew there were 100,000 troops outside of Ukraine since November. Like, it wasn't a secret. Wars have warnings, hurricanes have warnings. Tsunamis tend to be triggered by earthquakes. Earthquakes are just violent and extremely sudden. And when it's the earth that betrays you, you really have nowhere to go. And that rattles you deeply for a long time. So you saw that on people for a long time. You saw the physical damage for a long time, but you saw that paranoia, that jumpiness.
Yeah.
Because the earth, you can't duck, you can't hide.
Thank you.
I want to open up again to the rest of the group. Does anyone have any questions? It doesn't have to be about the book, you know. It doesn't have to be about what we've read. It could be around identity or experiences. Also, silences don't bother us here. We could sit in silence until someone has a question. But I also wanted to name Dimitry just because we have you here. I don't know, this is odd. I don't know if you have the book accessible with you in this moment, or if you're able to, if there's text around. But if we love readings, we love live readings from the author. But if you don't have a book, because this was a little, the universe put us together tonight, it's totally fine. But it would be nice to hear some words.
I don't.
Wow.
I moved here a month ago, and most of my books are in the old family house in Geneva and at a friend's house in Jersey. And I didn't bring one copy of the book with me. I think I might have a copy, but in French. So no, I don't have any copies, which is very unusual for me, because it's talismanic and it's protective, but I don't have a copy.
Yeah.
One of the things, just to kind of go back to your description, we kind of touched on this early on, is how.
Oh wait, Ron, we just got a thing we just got a question in the chat from Liliana. Because I think, because you mentioned French before we hop to something else, I wouldn't mind hearing it in French. And I saw some people, when you said French, some people kind of perked up. So I want to honor that. That may be something we'd love to hear. And Liliana writes specifically, though, did you write the book initially in French, or? She didn't say or.
No.
Okay.
I wrote it in English because English is more efficient for me. I wrote it in English, but I think in French, but write in English in real life. And because I grew up, French, and my first books I read, my first literary voice was in French. But you come to America, you learn to write in English, and I wrote it in English because it's faster for me to write in English than in French. But I didn't translate it myself, because I knew if I tried translating it, I would have rewritten half of it. Because French is different, and plus rewriting is it's rewriting. But I found a French publisher in 2020, at the end of 2020, and they published the book in French last September.
Wow.
And the French critics really liked it, and the French translator did a great job. He did a really, really good job. And when I first read it in French, I was like, oh, it's like the original language.
Right.
Because it is closer to my internal language. So I have the French version here.
Yes.
For some reason, okay, there's a copy I'm supposed to send to somebody in France, but it's here. So you want me to read a passage here in French? Okay, I'll try to read a passage from one of the earlier chapters that you already read.
Thank you.
So maybe it'll be somehow familiar. Good old Alain. Welcome to Place Pigeon. So I guess it's chapter 2. I think they stayed faithful with that in the translation. All right, so this is the chapter called Welcome to Place Pigeon in English, but in French is Bienvenue à Place Pigeon. Au lendemain du tremblement de terre, à la surprise de la plupart des habitants de l'île et du monde entier, le soleil se leva sur Haïti, comme à l'accoutumée depuis l'aube des temps. Palpitant, brillant et chaud, il rayonna sur la terre comme une immense bougie jaune, avec un soin particulier pour les Caraïbes. Le soleil haïtien d'après le séisme se planta dans un ciel si bleu que la mer caribéenne parut s'élever et se fondre en lui. L'air conservait, lui aussi, son léger parfum d'ordinaire. La fraîcheur ambiante poussait les coqs à chanter de tout leur cœur. Et ce matin-là, ils le firent avec détermination, force et fierté. L'île était toujours au-dessus des eaux. Les palmiers se satisfaisaient assez de cette situation pour étaler leurs longues coiffes feuillies. Le matin apportait une chaleur croissante et le réchauffement du sol sous son séant aida Alain Destiné à tenter une nouvelle fois de reprendre ses esprits. That's the first page of chapter 2.
Thank you so much.
It's so beautiful. I didn't understand a word, but it's so beautiful to listen to you read it in French.
Thank you.
Everyone can listen to French like nonstop. You don't have to understand. You just sit, but no matter what they're saying, what book it is, you can just listen to French like all day. It makes me regret all the time I wasted not taking French seriously in junior high school when it was forced on me.
Well, he translated the chapter almost, the opening page of that chapter almost word for word. And there's that whole opening with Alain waking up and that whole thing about the morning after the earthquake, the sun rose just like any other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that was strange, but also real.
Mm-hmm. Is there a second book in the works, or?
I know. I need to stop moving countries. Now that I'm settled here, and I'm relatively united with my family again, I think I'll have some stability to be able to explore that. I have a second book outlined and ready for a while now. But there's also a TV show in development.
Okay.
A TV series, and then so there's that adventure that I'm driving that in a way, like pushing this team out in LA to get the deal done and get us the green light. I outlined the TV series, and I created a series Bible, they call it, and so that's taking a lot of my creative energies. What was the question there from Carrie?
Carrie's asking, is there a particular language that you'd like to see God Loves Haiti being translated into, or is there more than one?
Good question. Good question. Well, I just moved to Sweden. And so since I'm here, I'd like to see it published in Sweden. And I'm going to be here for a long time. So I just see it published in Swedish. And I'm going to Rome for Easter on Thursday. It's kind of like Muslim going to Mecca. It's like you're Catholic going to Rome for Easter. It's like, yeah, the Catholic Super Bowl. And when I'm there, I'm gonna pop into a couple of English bookstores that are there and look into Italian publisher. It's pretty low key out here in Europe when it comes to like publishing. Like the French publisher, I heard about him in an interview with a Martinican journalist, and I just emailed him. And he's like, "Oh, not a bad idea," and then he just did it. So I'm hoping I could repeat that with Italy and Sweden soon, because I'm here now. So I'll get a kick of seeing it in Swedish, and well, Italy, why not? Spain too, ideally. But
yes, Anais.
I was just going to ask, can you share what's brought you to Sweden? And you said you're going to be there for a while.
Yes. So my ex-wife is Swedish. We met in New York. We met in Soho. Like any Haitian meets a Swede, you meet in New York. And then we had a couple of kids, and I got a job in Geneva, and we moved to Geneva after grad school. And then we're in Geneva Geneva is home base. So while I spent about over 10 years running around the disaster zones for the UN, we raised the kids in Geneva. And then during the pandemic, our 15-year-old really wanted to go to school in English. And the ex-wife thought it would be a good idea. Might as well put her in an international school, but in Sweden, because it's cheaper than in Geneva. And she'd stay with her aunt. Her mom would come up a lot. It'll be fun. It'll be a change of pace. Why not? We kind of treat moving around countries a lot like Americans treat moving around states. That's how the family just works. So we chose to do that, and then so 2021 we she's in school here and she's thriving, and it's like, okay, then she's gonna stay here all the way through high school. And then I came here in January I always come and check in on them, but in January, in this late December, Katerina is her name, she caught COVID. And while she caught COVID, she had to stay in Geneva and recover, and it was a mean case of COVID. And our daughter came here to Sweden by herself to start school, the new semester. And I'm like, no, it's not cool for her to be like out here starting school by herself. And also because she lost her credit card in the car ride from the airport, the taxi. So I'm scrambling to send her money. And I'm like, no, I just get on a plane and come, and I work from home from here. So I did that, and I'd always come almost quarterly for a family emergency to look after things. And while I was here for that month, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to find a job and stay. I wanna be across town from my daughter instead of an 8-hour flight away. And her big brother is in college in the UK. So it was like, everyone would be happier if I'm in the same time zone. And then miracle of miracles, during those 3 weeks, I found a job. And then I came back and I dropped everything, gave up my car, my apartment, and a month later I moved here.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I see that Judy has a question as well. Feel free, Judy, to unmute yourself.
Hello. I feel bad.
Hey, Julie.
I haven't finished the book, and I was like, oh no, they all
It's okay. It's okay.
No one has.
But I kind of have two questions. So also Caribbean, Haitian parents, one is, it's kind of two questions, but they're completely different from each other. Like growing up Haitian and telling your parents you wanted to write, or was that something later? Because, Haitian parents are always looking at the doctors and the lawyers and the teachers. So I was curious about how your family thought about your career path. And my second part was, part of my ignorance, I don't remember the year, but with hearing the president dying, assassinated basically, and hearing the conspiracies of somebody in Miami, and then there was a whole international. While reading your book, I thought to myself, could this be his part 2 to the book? And you wish that had to happen when you were writing, you would be like, oh, when we had a James Bond moment going on there. But I was just curious if you were just like that kind of writer. It's like, why did this event happen after the book? Yeah. So that was that.
Well, to your first question, I got a pass. I was allowed to become a writer because my older brother became an engineer, went to work for AT&T, put in 30 years. He did all the right things, so I didn't have to. Mm-hmm. He took the bullet for me. I got the kid brother freedom to be the creative one. And plus I can't count, so it was this or nothing. And then secondly, whenever there's a tragedy in Haiti, I have to do a lot of press. I have to write about it. And Haiti's been in a civil war now since 2018. And people have been randomly getting shot and dying quite frequently. Kidnappings have been up. Random murders have been up for quite a bit for the last 4 years. Basically, in a civil war situation. When the president got killed, it was like, oh, okay, somebody else got assassinated. It was chickens coming home to roost on some other hand, on one hand. On the other hand is lawlessness. No one's immune. And the way he was killed was fairly easy. And that kind of answers to, that kind of echoes the powerlessness that the president has in this novel. Because it was very easy for guys to just walk into his house and kill him. Because it doesn't have the office, doesn't have the gravity and the wealth to protect itself the way it does in America. And then again, America has had more presidents shot than any country in the West. Any country in the West. So there's always parallels between Haiti and America. But yes, that death was, it was stunning. It was a cry for help, but it was really a reflection of a violent state of affairs of 4 years and counting. And how could it end? All roads lead to Washington in the sense that most of Haiti's problems are economic, and turning Haiti's economy on, there's literally an off and on switch in Biden's office. If they ever turned it on, and I wrote a piece about this for Time magazine last summer after the assassination, if you turned it on, then you're gonna see things change. Now, it means trade, it means overpaying for rice and for beaches. It means all the good stuff that makes Jamaica and DR and Bahamas actually work well. Is when you're a favorite nation of America, they overpay for your stuff. They come through. They encourage people to come through. They take over your country, and and you're happy about it. They do it all the time. That's the on switch, but right now it's still in yellow, and they're still right now they're in the containment phase of Haiti. So they're letting the civil war fester. As long as there's no refugee crisis coming from Haiti, then they're okay. And that's what's happening there. So no, it's not an opportunity to sell more books or a sequel, but it does echo that the job is a precarious one. It always has been.
Thank you so much. Those are excellent questions, Judy. I want to name that it is 8:20, which means it's probably 2:20 for you over there. Woo, baby.
Yes.
So we usually end at 8:30, but I want folks to get that, this is our 10-minute reminder, 10 minutes or less, depending on how much energy we can still have from Dimitry. And Renee, I see you. I'm coming. Renee, where'd you go? You raised your hand, right? You have a question? I see you, but I want to also acknowledge super quickly that as of yesterday, we've had an excellent article published on Bronx.com with like a very low profile, low key picture of Ron from here to here. But it's an excellent article around what we're discussing right now, God Loves Haiti. I just want y'all to share it with your friends, post it to your pages. Remind folks that Ron Kavanaugh's out here doing the good work, the necessary work. And we're gonna, Ron, we're gonna hype you up as much as possible whenever we can. So let's just take a moment and like shout out to you, Ron, acknowledge you, shout out to you, you're the bomb. And Renee, please bring us, what's the question?
Yes. I wanted to ask Dimitry, who are some of his favorite writers?
Most of them blurbed the book. I got lucky. Edwige Danticat, of course. She's the patron saint of Haitian writers, Haitian American writers in particular. She wrote the most dramatic and the most beautiful books about Haitians, about the intimate of Haitian lives. And she gave me the freedom to find a lane different than hers. So that was, yeah, it was true. I mean, I was like, okay, what? She got drama covered. I gotta find a different, and it took me 20 years to find a different lane, but she was supportive the whole way. And Juno Diaz, I mean, it's like the 1-2 punch from Hispaniola. They both came out at the same time. They're the same age, and he is funny and he is romantic. And I love the bilingual, the multilingual nature of his prose. And okay, it was like, wow, he gave me freedom to be, you know, fully multilingual. So Juno and Edwidge are really my big touchstones. And after that, Hemingway. Give it 100% Hemingway, because he wrote about war, and trying to find love in difficult circumstances, a lot. Farewell to Arms in particular, that novel, and it was huge influence. One of the great how-to books I read about writing novels said that recommended that you take a novel you really like and you go chapter by chapter, you write a summary of every chapter. And I remember I did that with Farewell to Arms, and the way it moved was really helpful. Plus the prose is so simple, and I don't write simple prose, but I admire simple prose. So Hemingway is huge. And then there's an African writer named Alain Mabankou. He teaches at UCLA, so he's actually in the US, but he's like the biggest African writer in France. And he doesn't use quotation marks, and he writes about presidents and insanity, and that was helpful. And then there's a writer named Daniel Léger. He's Haitian. He's the most loved writer in France, and probably will win a Nobel Prize someday. And get this, his first novel, published in like 77 or 78, the title is How to Make Love to a Negro Without Getting Tired.
I think they made it a movie also.
And it got made into a movie, and it's about a Haitian writer who comes from Haiti, barely escapes the dictatorship in the 70s, moves to Montreal, freezing his butt off, and has to have sex with the landlord's daughter to be able to get away with not paying his rent until he could finish that first novel and make it. And it's a very funny novel, and he's written like 30 books. Including an earthquake book, and his books have always been funny. They've always been about sex, and they've always been pretty funny and occasionally deep. They mostly exist in French, but I remember reading the first book and then going, "Oh, we could do this. We could do this." And then there's Dante, who's referenced shamelessly in the novel. He's my dude, and that poem, The Divine Comedy. That was a key breakthrough, because I had to find poetry was so clutch for writing, because I need to stop being a journalist. I need to get away with that, unlearn all that. It took me a decade. And then I had to find lightness. I had to find lightness in the heaviness that is Haitian life. And poetry was just clutch. And Dante really does a good job with that. And the Divine Comedy is almost about a writer trying to reconcile with a lost love. So there you go. My favorite theme.
Thank you.
Are you in the midst of reading anything right now?
It's Easter, so I have this.
Conversations with God.
I'm gonna curl up with this later. It's a collection of prayers by African Americans for 2 centuries.
Oh, wow.
From prayers during slavery time to prayers like in the 90s and in the Obama years.
Right.
Yeah, it's the 20th anniversary version of it, and I've been reading it all week. The prayers read like poems. Prayers read like poems, and that's my book of the week, really. And it's Holy Week, and it just so happens that it's one of the few books I brought with me, and it's getting me through.
When you reference Easter, I almost thought you were going to pull out the King James Bibles and be like, Dimitry, this is so against everything you've been talking about for an hour and a half. What's going on? No, thank you so much. Folks, let's give it up verbally, digitally, if you can, audio. Let's give it up for Dimitry. Thank you so much for pushing past the insane hour to be with us. We're definitely worth it, but we hope you feel it. I want to acknowledge folks that we have links in the chat to access some of the information that we discussed today, including Dani Lafreya's how to make love to a Negro without getting tired. And just a reminder that we have Barbara's Beyond Word book clubs. And right now they're reading Everything Inside, Stories by Edwidge Danticat, and you can follow that link. We're going to be meeting next week again. Tuesday, that's the 19th, when we're going to be reading part 3. So make sure you complete part 3. That's physically pages 129 to 196. If you have an audiobook, I'm sorry, I don't know what pages those are, but part 3, right? You'll be able to find it. No worries if you haven't finished through 1 and 2 yet, but try to get that done. 2 minutes left. Anything you want to say? Thank you so much, Dimitry. Again, thank you. We're so happy.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome. Thanks for choosing my book, and thank you. This was a delight. My homesickness is cured for another year, so I'm looking out.
Yes, a bunch of New Yorkers will do that for you.
Yes. Have a good one, guys.
Bye. Have a great night.
Bye-bye. Good night.